Testing, testing. Why is it not showing me? Hey, Scott.
Yes.
Oh, here we are. I just wanted to see it's a recall. Do you hear that recall?
Everything sounds normal to me. There is a little echo there. Yeah, I hear echo.
Goodness gracious. So it has a delay. No, that is that's me. Scott, I said that 10 seconds ago. Okay, let me hear now. Do you think I'm just talking to see if I could hear. Testing, testing. Okay. 5 minutes. Hey, hi, Laurel. All right. Scott,
Yes,
are you ready?
I'm ready.
We're going to give a few minutes for people to join. I know we have people that are watching live from our YouTube.
So will this be available on YouTube afterwards or just live streamed?
No, we are actually we're only recording it for our we're only recording it for our information. We made
On
promises to
Zoom.
the hospital, right? So once we start gathering everything and like making a highlight video, we'll make sure that the kids aren't shown. I'm going to start the recording now. And we can start. Let's give a couple more minutes. How's your day today? I forgot to ask you that.
Oh, it's so nice out today, isn't it? It's a little cooler and just clear. So today is a nice day.
It is beautiful. I'm excited because it's Friday and I'm hoping that it'll be nice this weekend.
Fridays are always good. Yes.
Fridays are always good. Yes, yes. So we are going to start. Hello, everyone. Welcome to ABF's virtual art session. And you may know I am Latanya Morrison, and I am here with our amazing art instructor, Scott Boyack. And Scott is going to take over. Last month, we didn't have a lot of time. So I want to make sure that I stop talking and let the artist do his thing and show us some amazing ways to draw. Scott?
All right. Thank you, Latanya, and thank you everyone for joining. I'm looking forward to drawing a few different things today. Uh, Last time when we were on, we drew some dogs, and then I asked everybody, "What would you like to draw next?" And so the feedback was birds. So I've selected 5 or 6 different birds, and I'm going to teach you guys all how to draw those pretty easily. And you can draw along, ask questions, any kind of feedback you have. Think about what you'd like to draw next time too, because I enjoy doing these kind of things and I enjoy experimenting or finding new animals to learn about and to draw. So let me go ahead and share my paper. We'll get right to it. Get that in focus. Okay, if you can see that, these were just some of my practice sketches that I was working on. And this is what we'll do today as well, is just create some drawings. Uh, I'm going to step you through the basics, and then you just follow along. And as we go, we'll get more complex and do some things in more detail. Uh, if you remember from last time too, one of the things I asked for was just a request for a drawing that I would create offline. So this time, I went and drew a bird sort of in my full style, and you may or may not know what kind of bird this is. I don't know if anybody recognizes that kind of bird. I had fun drawing this. It's a emu, and an emu is kind of like an ostrich. It's a bird in Africa, and you may recognize it also on TV. So there's a lot of commercials going on right now that include an emu. So these are the Liberty Mutual insurance commercials, and they always have the emu kind of running around in there. So it's the same bird. This is what they look like in person, and that was my drawing. So as we're going today, if you guys, I mean, I love requests. So as you guys are drawing with me today, if there is an animal for a next session you would like me to create, I'll go off and find it and try to create a drawing. And, again, as some more examples, when I'm drawing on my own, I do everything in pen and ink. So it starts out as a pencil sketch like we'll have today, but then it gets more detailed and I start doing things in pen and ink. So I'm going to show you just a few more of these types of drawings. We today will do the pencil drawings, and then depending on time, I will show you how I create a drawing like this. So I can do this in maybe 10 or 15 minutes. So at that point, I'll just demonstrate how to use a pen and ink one to create a drawing. But some of the other drawings I have, I actually went back and was looking through my collection. I've done a lot of birds, and it turns out birds are kind of fun to draw because they have a lot of interesting shapes and a lot of interesting characters. And birds. One of the things I learned, and I noticed this after drawing the last one, is that birds are very closely related to dinosaurs. I would not have thought that, but now when I look at them, every time I looked at this guy, I was like, geez, doesn't that look like one of those things you would see in Jurassic World, the movie, or you can imagine that being back in time? So I did a little research on it, and true indeed, birds are very closely related to dinosaurs. So let's just flip through a couple drawings. This you probably recognize is just a goose. Here is another drawing, and boy, if there's one animal I could be for a day, I think it would be a bird, because I look at something like this and I think that guy is just having fun. He's just flying, swooping around a corner, and wouldn't it be fun to just kind of float around and flap your wings and fly? So I've drawn a couple birds like this, but this is one of my favorites because it has such volume as to what he's doing.
That's beautiful, Scott.
Here's another one. You probably recognize this. I ended up drawing this one just because it was such an unusual angle that this was captured in. But you you probably recognize the color as a flamingo if I had drawn it in pink, but you're looking kind of down at it. So you've got his head there, and then in the background is his body as it fades to sort of the background. Here's another flying guy. And again, one of the fun things about art is that when you're drawing something, you spend a lot of time on it. So it can take me a full day, anywhere from 10 to 20 hours to complete a drawing like this. And so you spend a lot of time thinking about that animal, thinking about what they're doing, how they look, and you end up just kind of, learning more about nature. This particular bird is called a red kite, and I'd never heard of it before. I just liked the image. It turns out it's kind of like an eagle, but it only exists in Europe. So it doesn't exist in America. You wouldn't see one out on your own unless you were traveling. So it's just another one of these animals that you kind of learn about. This one, I'm curious if anybody recognizes. I'm trying to get that in focus. So I don't know if anybody knows the cartoon anymore, the Roadrunner, when he goes, meep, meep. You got it right. It's a Roadrunner. So these guys exist a lot in areas like Texas, and you would catch them running across the street or the road. Here's another one. Anybody guess what this is? I drew this one because sometimes when you look at birds and you look at them up close, they really look alien. And so this is a bird that but it doesn't necessarily, since I didn't show the whole body, you know, not necessarily what it was. But LaTanya knows it's a peacock. And so usually you think of peacocks as having the big, huge tail feathers. But when you look at them up close, they have some very unusual feathers just in their head. So had to draw that guy. One more drawing I'll show. And I know on this one, I'll be really impressed if anybody gets it because it's another bird that doesn't exist in America. This is a bird that only exists in Africa. And I wanted to draw it because it was such a challenge. It has like this big, poofy, almost like a hat that it's wearing, but it's just sort of fur and feathers coming out of its head that looks like a big, soft, pom-pom kind of thing. And this is called a crowned crane. And again, it only exists in Africa. And because I drew it, I got to learn about it and research it and just, think about it a lot. So this is one I like to draw. So with that, we're going to get into actually creating some drawings ourselves. So the way I work these things is I'll usually just start with a photo and maybe one or more photos. So I just go on Google or on my phone, I find an image, and then I go and I sort of recreate it. So on the left are all the different kinds of birds that we can draw for this lesson. And on the right are a bunch of my sort of practice drawings. So I was like trying to think about them, figure out how they worked, how to create them. And we're going to recreate some of those things. So we'll start with the parakeet. So the green bird in the center top. And then, I'll let some people pick what they'd like to draw. So I'm going to start with a clean piece of paper. All you need is a pencil. I tend to use a mechanical pencil because then I don't have to worry about sharpening it all the time. But just any pencil like you would use in school. A number 2 pencil is fine. You just want to keep the tip kind of sharp so that you're in control of what you're drawing. I then also have an eraser. So this is just a standard type eraser that I can erase. I also have, this is called a kneaded eraser. And it's just one of these soft erasers. It's kind of like putty. And I tend to use this a lot because when I erase, it doesn't leave all those pieces of the the eraser that I have to then clean up. But both will work. So anything you have, it could be the end of your pencil, works just fine. So what I'll typically do when I'm drawing is I have the image that I want to create. I'll put that next to my paper and I just think about it then. And as I went through these over the past week, I kind of noticed some familiar patterns with birds. And I'll explain this as we go along, but all birds kind of, I've discovered, have a similar shape in that they have sort of a giant oval or an egg shape for their body. They have a circular head, and then they have triangles that form their tail and their wings. And then the difference between the birds is that they have different kinds of necks. They have different sizes for these things, different positions, but the fundamentals are all the same. So let's start and draw the parakeet. And what I've done here is I started out, I have the photo at the top, and I kind of highlighted then over on the left side here, the basic shapes. So I'm seeing kind of an oval or an egg shape for the body, and I'm seeing a circle for the head. So let's get started by creating those shapes first. And when I draw, one of the things you'll notice is that I kind of hold the pencil at the end. You know, when you're in school or you're writing, you'll hold it up near the tip of the pencil and you're very controlled in doing small things. Well,
That's light, Scott.
oh, that's still light. Okay. Uh, the better way to hold a pencil when you're sketching is to hold it near the eraser end. And the reason for that is because I'm trying to focus in on big shapes. I'm not going in for the detail. And when I get to the detail, then maybe I'll hold it closer to the sharpened point. But to start out, just sketch an oval. It doesn't have to be exact. You don't want to go super dark because in the beginning, you're kind of guessing what these shapes are. You don't know exactly. Drawing's sort of imprecise, and you'll correct as you go. So you start out very loose, and then as you progress, you get more and more refined. So we start out with just sort of this, egg shape for the body. Let's go ahead and throw in a circle for the head. And it looks like it's, maybe I need to move it over a little bit. So I'll already use my eraser. So I've got the starts now. I'm going to fill in just a tiny bit for where the neck is. So it looks like the neck kind of joins these two. So on the one side, I'll just draw a little bit of that arc. It looks like on this side, he's already, his body's sort of crossing over there. So I don't do too much. I just maybe cross off a little bit of that circle. And, again, the body's starting to form a shape there. So the next thing I'm going to do is draw in the triangles, and these will become the tail and the wings. So there's not much in this particular view of the parakeet, but there is a tail. So let me go and put that into the drawing. And it looks like, it sort of has a tail inside a tail. It's just the feather. So there's kind of two triangles for the wing. I've got this other triangle. And it goes down. So at this point, I've kind of sketched the bird. Let's go ahead and erase, what we did with those circles and the triangles. Those were sort of the the shapes we use to build this thing, construction shapes, but they're not actually part of our finished drawing. So I'm going to erase some of those. So now we've just sort of got the outline of the parakeet. I'm going to keep going here. So now at this point, I will put in the branch. You don't necessarily have to put in the branch. And I don't know if parakeets, I used to have some parakeets when I was a kid. And
Me
they were
too,
fun birds.
Sky.
Did you? That's why I decided
did.
to draw one. Some of my parakeets were good. They were nice. I would stick my finger in, and this reminds me because they could wrap their claw all the way around your finger, and that was always really fun. You hold it and you feel proud. And then I had other ones that weren't always that nice, and they would kind of bite you a little bit. And I'd be like, I'm not trying to hold you. So I'm just going to sketch those in a little bit and give the general impression of some kind of feet. The bird's feet are really kind of funny. They're super long, and that's so that they can wrap around these things. So they have these long toes and then even longer claws that you can't see. It's probably wrapped around the other side of that branch. If you've gotten this far though, so now what I'm going to do is just add a little bit more detail to give us the inside shape of this bird. So I know in the head that it kind of wraps around. That's his neck. And it wraps around the backside that way. Cleaning up a little bit with my eraser. So now what I've gotten here is his chest forming, his head forming, and we're going to put in things like his beak and his eye. So let's start with the beak here. They've kind of got this curved beak. So some birds, I was drawing like a woodpecker, and it has a very, very straight beak, whereas a parakeet has this curved beak. And I think that's because they are seed eaters. So they will put those into their beaks, and then they can crack open the seed. So a parakeet kind of has that rounded mouth. It also has this funny looking nose. And I don't know why they have this, but that was always one thing I remember from my parakeets is the big nostrils. And then somewhere in the back is the eye. So when you first draw these, you can see, they start to form. And I said, draw your shapes kind of lightly. And part of that reason is because you're just guessing at what the shapes are. And if I'm looking at my bird now, I think, I look at my reference drawing on the left, and I think his head should be a little bit taller. So maybe I want to, trim that in a little bit. So now I'll go darker. With my preferred shape. Same thing for the wing. And the tail. And if you've gotten this far, it starts to look like a real parakeet. What will make it look even more now is if we add in just a little bit of shading. I'm not going to go into complete detail here, but if you were working on your own, now's when you might want to start. Actually, I want to move that high a little bit. when you start applying the shading, you start to recognize these things a little more. So I see his wing. He's got feathers going along the wing. And they typically have some pattern going along the back of the neck. And a little bit along the cheek. And there we go. That's our first bird. So this is the parakeet. You can play around with these things. What I've noticed now as we go on to another bird is the same pattern exists. So as we drew this, we drew two circles. One was sort of an egg shape for the body, one was a circle for the head, and then two triangles, a triangle for the tail and a triangle for the wings. When no matter what bird I was drawing, I found those same patterns. So we're going to draw some birds that don't look at all like parakeets, but we'll see the same exact shapes. So I'm going to start out now with another sheet of paper. And this time I wanted to draw a bird that was something you just see in your backyard. So I think everybody at one point or another has seen a robin, especially out hunting the worms early in the morning. They say the early bird gets the worm, and that would always be sort of the robin. So here again is my drawing or my photo that I found that I want to recreate. And then I looked at it and I thought, from the big picture, what are the shapes that I see? And I kind of see, the two circles and the true triangles. So let's go ahead and we'll create the exact same thing ourselves. So again, holding my pencil at the end. I know this is light. I'm just drawing with an oval. It's kind of like an egg. And I'm thinking, maybe a bird, they need to stay light. And so they have this sort of an aerodynamic. So they kind of just have this egg shape to them that probably makes it easy to fly. And then it's a little bit bigger at the top because they got to have all those wing muscles. So it's kind of like the pectoral, your chest muscles. They're flapping their wings all the time. So they're probably kind of pretty muscular up in the chest. So here I've drawn that part again. I'm going to draw the head. And, one of the things, if we compare this to the parakeet that we were just drawing, the parakeet was very vertical. So its starting position was more like this because they sit sort of straight up. But these guys kind of lean a little bit. So their shape is a little bit different, but it's still the same pieces. So now I'll add in a triangle for the wings.
So this is the side wing.
That's the side wing. So this triangle. And we will draw, a longer triangle for the tail. So we've got basically those four shapes in there again. We're going to go ahead and connect the circle.
I have a question, Scott.
Yes, go ahead.
Is it okay for them to erase as they make mistakes?
Absolutely. And nobody's going to get it right on the first try. So there is no such thing as a perfect line. That's why you want to start with your lines kind of light, because you're kind of guessing where those lines go. And then as you gain confidence that, okay, I like where that line is, then you can darken it, because it's harder to erase the dark mark. So you kind of, that's called sketching. You kind of sketch lightly, and then you go in with the harder press once you are pretty sure that you like where that line is. But you're going to be constantly going back and forth. You're just guessing where it goes, and then you're refining and refining and refining. What they say about art is it's just a series of corrections. It's not that you draw perfectly the first time. You have to put something on your paper, you look at it, and you say, that's either right or I need to do this. What is it I need to do? Do I need to make that circle smaller? Do I need to move it one direction or another? But once you made that decision, you move it, and you may have to erase as you go too. So it's no problems, never anything that's wrong. That's why they have erasers. If we could all get it right on the first try, we wouldn't need erasers. So on that note, I will go ahead and use my eraser too, because I made my initial sketch marks, but now I kind of want to get rid of some of those guidelines. So I'm going to get rid of the marks that are in between, like this circle. His body isn't really a circle. It just was something useful for me as I was sketching this out to kind of get the approximate shape. So I start to clean it up, and it starts looking more and more like the actual bird. And some parts, I'll notice that aren't quite right. Like I think I want to carve out a little bit there. So I'll go in with my darker line now and say that's where that should be. So this guy, like the other one, is sitting on a branch. And then he's got his claws kind of wrapped around to hold on tight there. So I just sketched in the feet a little bit. They're not exactly like the photo. That's okay. But what I'm going to do is to make it look more like the real bird. Now I'll go ahead and I'll add some more of the parts in. So I want to add in the beak.
How do you know to make the adjustments, Scott?
Well, this is where you spend a lot of time looking. So you look at your drawing, and it's not a race. You just stop and think, and you can say, what doesn't look right compared to that, the photo, or just my imagination? What am I thinking isn't quite right? And, sometimes you just have to experiment. And so if you think it's right, then it probably is right. But if it's not, just go ahead and make some corrections. So like if I'm looking at this bird now, I was spending the whole time as I was talking there, I was looking too. And I'm thinking, okay, I got still some parts of this circle that make it look like he has a rounded shoulder. But I'm looking at that photo, and I think the head kind of comes down and it's straight. So this is a correction I'm going to make. So I'm going to draw that, and I'm going to take part of that circle out. So all of a sudden it starts to look a little bit more like the real bird. Same kind of thing on the head. So, we started out, a circle was perfect for our initial creation of the head. But as I want to give it a little more character, or I want to think of what that bird really looks like, he's got kind of a longer forehead. So I just make a little edit like that, and it really comes from observation. So this is where, again, like I said, one of the things I really like about art is that I get to look at these things for a long time. I mean, never really thought about what is, the only thing I thought about casually for a robin is that it has the red chest. But now that I'm sitting here and looking at it, I can really kind of study it and see different kinds of things. And I didn't know offhand that the robin has, that red head. I wasn't thinking of that. I just was thinking of the red chest. So I'm going to throw that in there now. And
That one looks like it's a little pregnant there.
Could be. They all have. I wonder if that's the feathers or if that's actually the size of the bird. Because if you've ever held a bird, they're so light. There's like nothing to them, and that's so they can fly, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the feathers probably fluff up too, and that gives them, keeps them warm in the cold.
So he has a little V-neck.
Exactly. Yeah. And unlike the parakeet that had the rounded beak, he's got a straight beak. And I think he uses that for pecking. So like he flies down to the ground and is looking for the worms and bugs that he eats. So instead of crunching seeds, he's looking for something sharp to kind of just go in there into the grass and find the thing he wants. So once I've got the basic shapes in, if you want, you can do some shading. I'm just going to draw scribbles or some straight lines over that. That starts to give it a little bit of a feel of what that the real bird looks like. I also noticed that he's a little bit darker down around his chest where there's a shadow. So I draw in a little bit there. His wings are kind of black. So he's got a couple layers of feathers. So I'll draw that into, and let's go ahead and put this in the whole chest, just so that we can remember this guy is a robin. And there's the basics. So there I've created now, another type of bird. Again, this guy was just like the parakeet. He came from a triangle. He came from two circles for the body and the head, and that's that guy. How are we on time? 2:36. So now we can go and draw maybe a more exotic bird. And I'll show you how even these guys look just like the other ones. It's just that they have different lengths of their necks or legs or different parts. But basically, they have the same forms as the parakeet and the robin. So are there any requests for a type of bird? I mean, what I've got here, I've got a duck. He's swimming in the water. I've got a heron. If you've ever seen those are kind of like fishing birds. They live near the water and they kind of walk in the water and, will stick their heads in to get fish. I've got a swan. I've got a woodpecker, a pigeon, and a penguin.
Sharon said swan.
Swan. Okay. So swans are one of those, from afar, they're beautiful birds. And if you've ever been up close to a swan, they're big. They're really big. And so they were kind of interesting to research too. A lot of times, I don't know if they actually do this in nature. What you will notice, they have a really long neck, so it's kind of shaped like this. A lot of times, they would show pictures of two swans facing each other, And you can imagine if there was the other swan here, their two necks form a heart shape. So I
Hmm.
think a lot of people think of swans from a romantic standpoint.
And Scott, they are beautiful, but they are aggressive birds.
Yeah, you don't want, if you see one, do not try to go pet it. It's surprising some of the birds. If you've ever been near a goose too, a Canadian goose, you
Hmm.
hear them a lot, flying through the air, but they're silly birds. Like they'll go and create their nest right in a parking lot. So I've had that when I would go to work. They'd have to fence off the area because those birds
Hmm.
got really defensive of their nest. And I'd be like, you, you have your nest right where I'm supposed to park my car. But they would chase people, so you don't want to make them mad. So we're going to go ahead and draw this guy. Now, what's also interesting with them is most of the time you see them in the water. So I'm going to start out drawing another oval, and you might say, I don't see that oval in the photo, but that's because half of it is underwater.
Underwater.
Yeah. So a lot of times in art, you'll use what's called your X-ray vision. And so you have to think of these things, the whole bird or what's behind the bird. And for your initial sketches, you'll draw it that way. So I'm not too concerned that he's half underwater. I just know that for his whole body, there is a circle there. So I'll draw it that way, and then I'll probably erase out that line as we go. So I've created the initial oval. Uh, and if you remember for the parakeet and the robin, their heads were pretty much connected right to their bodies. Not so with the swan. So the swan's actually got a head that's kind of far away. And it's crazy the kind of necks. They're like giraffes. They just have these long necks. They can turn all sorts of angles. So we'll put the other circle up top somewhere, and when we connect it, we'll draw the neck. But to be similar to the other ones, we're going to draw the tail and the feathers or the wings. In different kinds of birds, again, they all have the same parts, but in different sizes and different shapes. So he's got a tail, this guy. It's just a little teeny tiny thing. So whereas the parakeet had the really long tail, uh, the swan only has a little one, and I think that's because the parakeet, he sits on a branch, and so he uses his tail as something to bounce. If he's falling forward, he sticks his tail out the back, and that evens him out a little bit. Whereas the swan's floating in the water, he doesn't need that big tail; it would just get in the way. So he just got this little tail. It's kind of there. He's got wings. A lot of times, what they'll do, sort of a funny shaped triangle, is when they're in the water, they curl both of their wings up, and they're up and behind them. I don't know why they do this either. That's something maybe I should look up. Maybe it's to keep them dry or keep them out of the water. But he's got a wing on this side, and there's a wing on the other side. So they're sort of both triangular shapes. Uh, just again, different sizes than some of the other birds that we drew. So at this point, I've got in parts of the body, parts of the head. I'm gonna have a little fun, and I'm gonna draw the neck now. And so the neck is kind of like the letter S. Goes around one side, comes down, and then it curls back in. So again, I sketch lightly, as I get going and I get more confidence that I've made my lines in the right spot, I will draw them more darkly. So I've sketched that in a little bit. I gave him a little more of a curve to his neck than the one in the photo, but I've seen all sorts of these things, and they can bend these things in all directions, kind of like the crane that's above there. They can just turn and twist, and so he could have his neck like this, and that's just how I choose to draw it. I'm also going to put in his beak.
That's the beauty of art, right?
Yes. There is no right and wrong. So, you can imagine anything you want. Part of what is, fun about all of this is you choose what you like to create or draw. And so as you practice more and more, you can even draw things, you start to draw things that don't exist, like drawing a dragon or drawing, uh, you know, maybe, birds that have more than two wings, just anything that you can imagine or have fun with. So I've created some of the basics. This is just the initial shapes that I was using, but I'm starting to get distracted by some of my initial lines that maybe aren't part of the whole bird. So now I'm going to go and erase those. So this is the part that was under the water. The parts that were joining my initial circle. And just by erasing some of those things, everything starts to look a little more like the real swan. Again, you asked before, how do I know what to change? I just kind of look at it and say, what is most right or what is most wrong? And if I'm looking at this, the thing that looks most wrong to me is the head. It kind of looks like a duck instead of a swan. And if I'm looking at that photo, what I see in there is I think the head is longer than tall. So I need to make a change here. So I'm going to pull that back out and erase what I had before. And it starts to look more like a swan's neck now.
Mm-hmm.
I also think I kind of made his neck. His neck's not going to get thinner as it goes. It's always going to get a little bit thicker. So I think I probably need to make that neck thicker. I'll draw the water a little bit more. You can kind of imagine, he's really there. He's probably there, and he's probably got his legs out, and he's swimming. So he's got his sort of flippers, and one's kicking along, and one's kicking along. You can't see that, but that's what I imagine he's doing. Now he's a white bird, so there isn't much shading that goes in here, but there's a little bit underneath the neck, and there's always that marking on their beak. So I fill that in. I'll put in a little bit of shading just to make this thing feel like it's round. And there I have the basics of a swan. Does anyone have any questions?
I don't have a question. I have a comment. Um, because you made it so just simple. I think you're teaching us how to see.
I couldn't completely hear that. So you can also, if you have, if you're in the Zoom session, you can always write a comment in the uh, question session, and I'll answer it there.
So can you hear now, Scott?
I can hear you now.
Okay. I was saying that in seeing all of this and your instruction, I see that you're not teaching people how to draw, you're teaching people how to look, how to see. And
That is an excellent observation, because that is the very much the truth that when I went to art school, that's what we said all the time, is that there is no magic to drawing. It's all about seeing. So observing and learning how to see these things and experiencing them. And that is a very good observation on your part.
boy, you made it easy.
Uh, so looks like we've got 10 minutes. So we can do one of two things. I can either try to do a little bit of a quick sketch where I do one in pen, like I showed for that initial swan, or we can take on one of the other birds and draw that as well. Do you have any preference?
I think because a lot of hospitals are joining via YouTube, if you could do what you think is best.
I think I will draw another one of the birds. They're kind of fun to create, and each one of them makes me think a little bit. So as I was putting these together, my wife said she was the one that wanted a penguin. She said, I want to draw something that's fun. So let's go ahead and draw a penguin. It's another one of these crazy ones. Every bird, as I said, they have the same parts, but they use them differently. Some fly, some, hunt for worms or bugs, some crack open seeds and nuts. And so they're all shaped a little bit differently, but they start the same way. So let's find my drawing of the penguin. Got him somewhere here. There we go. So we'll go ahead and take a stab at drawing this guy. And it's the exact same process. We start out with an oval. So again, holding my pencil at the end, I'm just going to draw this general shape. So he's got this long, tall body, and he's got a small head that's kind of leaning out over the front. So I just put in my initial circle for this guy. He also has just a tiny little tail, but it's like a triangle. So just like the other ones, I see a triangle there. And then where he is a little bit different is in his wings. And penguins, unlike the other birds, can't fly, but what they can do is they can swim underwater. So their wings are kind of like the fins of a fish. So he still has them. They start up top and they go down, and it's just sort of shaped again like that triangle, but it's very narrow, very thin. And if you've ever seen them underwater, they may on the surface waddle around pretty slowly, but when they get underwater, these guys can move very fast. So
that looks like an arm.
Yeah, I think on there those are actually, I think this is like a giant hand, and his arm is actually just a short little thing here. And
Wow.
so he's kind of like just flapping his fingers out there. Uh, like the other drawings, I'll add in a little bit more. So he's got his feet down here. And I wonder with his tail, just looking at that picture, he's got his feet. And is his tail actually touching the ground? Like, is he standing there like it helps him balance, or is he completely standing on his feet? I don't know.
It looks like it's touching.
Kind of like a stool, he's kind of sitting on his tail a little bit. So now I'll take this drawing. I'm going to connect the head to the body. So, if I've got this general shape, it looks like the neck comes in and goes out. It looks like on the back side comes down and then it goes back out. So I'm going to erase a little bit of my construction lines here just so I can, again, see where everything is. I think maybe, on my drawing, if I'm looking at this, perhaps I need to move this triangle for the wing forward a little bit. I'm going to give him a beak. I think that they use, they eat fish, don't they? So they probably, when he swims in the water, he's probably using his beak to catch the fish. And I don't know if you can hear it right now. There's a little bit of a tapping sound in my studio. I think I've got a bird on the outside of my studio window who is maybe a woodpecker tapping at my wall. So I'm going to fill this in. Again, I'm gaining more confidence that I've got some of the right shapes. So I'm going darker and darker. And I've got sort of, the general shape. Need to remove this little construction line by the beak. So I've got the rounded shape again. And what really defines these penguins too is their colors. And so a lot of times people will think of a penguin as wearing a tuxedo because they got such black and white and a collar. So now I'm going to look at those sort of shapes and try to sketch them in some. So I'll start filling those parts in that are completely black. And you can shade things just by moving your pencil back and forth. Sometimes you do it and you'd like to go a little bit darker, so you can go in a different direction. So if I repeat my shading, but now I call cross hatching.
Can you share what the term crosshatching means?
So cross-hatching is just drawing a line. A hatch mark is kind of like another word for a line and going across it. So my first line, I went one way, and then for my second line, I go the other way. So cross, I'm going to cross it, so it's sort of cross hatching, and that's just a way to make things darker. Sometimes it's really hard to kind of fill in every little spot, so you use cross hatching to do that. And then I can do it even more. I could now go along this way. It'll get darker. So that's a very common way of just trying to make things darker and darker as you're shading.
Okay.
So there we have the penguin. And hopefully everybody saw from all these demonstrations that everything is the same shapes. It's just how you put them together, and it's just like people. We're all the same too. We might have a head, a body, arms and legs, and it's just how long are they? How short are they? How big are they? It's all, birds are all the same. They all have two wings, two legs, a tail, a beak, but they're all shaped quite a bit differently. And that's what the fun part of this is just trying to look at them and see how they all come together. So, Latanya, what would you like to do here? We're at 3 o'clock, so I know that was the target time.
Yes, it was, Scott. I am so proud of what I did. I'm excited. I wish we could see a lot of the families who are on YouTube, but if my art is any type of indication, I know that it was a success. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us, and we will let you guys know. We'll give you as much advance notice of the next art class. And I'm thinking that maybe we could do something more advanced. What do you think, Scott?
I am up for whatever. I mean, like I said, I'd like to do requests. And so if people would like to write back to you or contact you, I'm very comfortable doing, a variety of subject matters. And we can take one drawing even further and go into more detail, or we can do like this and just do, a bunch of particular type of things. It could be anything. It could be cars. It can be animals. It could be people. You can't get too complex because it's harder to draw certain things than it is to others. But we can have fun with just about anything.
Well, thank you so much. And I thank all of the hospitals that joined us and all of the superhero kids. I hope you have something to hang on your walls in your rooms. And I hope we were a wonderful distraction for you today. I hope everyone have a wonderful weekend. Scott, thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you to everybody who tuned in.
Bye.